when things kick off, especially these days, I'm very old school. I have some old school codes that I follow, old school gentlemen, but phones will come out. They'll hold up the phone. This could be great on Instagram. Very few guys, and the ladies could too, step forward in those moments. And it feels like we have less of them. I want to create more of those guys that are trained and ready to jump forward and do something. And I want to be that myself. So with that in mind, you may out there be that guy. I want to be that guy. I want to protect my family. I want to be the element. I'm willing to do that. And that's powerful. And it's much like yourself. You made the decision to do the job you do. And thank you very much. That's awesome. You chose to be a warrior, and that makes you a safe environment. You're a mobile, safe environment.
Wow.
I can hang out with you and feel better about what's going on.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Purpose Over Pleasure podcast with your host, Alex Payne. And today we have the pleasure of interviewing Sifu Alan Baker with us. This gentleman has got quite a story to tell. Done a little bit of reading, done a little bit of research on him, including reading his own book, which is very, very good book. We're going to get into in a second. But, sir, it's an honor to have you here. And I'll give you a chance, an opportunity to introduce yourself to my viewers and my listeners. The floor
Alex,
is
it's a
yours.
pleasure. Thank you for having me. My name is Sifu Alan Baker. I've been in the martial arts for 44 years. I became a professional martial artist around the early 90s. And started getting paid to do what I love. I've been doing that ever since. I was very fortunate to have a couple of students at that time that introduced me to the entrepreneurial world. And so I started building businesses and revenue streams in this industry. And it just started to grow from there and brought me to present day.
Wonderful, wonderful. I know you have a whole list of accolades and achievements and degrees. And I honest like one third of it, I didn't even know what those martial arts are, what those disciplines are. But maybe you want to tell the public real quick about your most significant achievements and most significant disciplines, or maybe something that was really challenging and in your mind was the most significant achievements in different disciplines.
Um, some of the more notable ones was probably JiuJitsu and combat submission wrestling under Sensei Eric Paulson. I would definitely have to list Guru Dan Anasano, Jeet Kune Do, Filipino Kali, and Indonesian Silat. As you know, Guru is a legend. Wing Chun Gung Fu. I've done that under actually 3 different instructors. One of probably the most recognizable would be Sifu Francis Fong here in Atlanta and Professor James Cravens out of Southern Florida.
Okay. That's I mean those and just those alone are already make you a pretty dangerous person. And you come from a Gracie school of jiu-jitsu, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I originally got introduced to jiu-jitsu through Guru Dan, and he would have one of the Machado brothers, John Jacques Machado, teach at his instructor camp. He'd come in the mornings and teach a few hours. So he was like, "You guys come in early tomorrow. You need to take this class. You need to see this thing." And that's when I first got introduced to it. And then shortly after that, Sensei Eric Paulson, who has a tremendous background, Shudo. He was actually one of the few individuals that trained in Hickson's garage when he first came to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And judo, submission wrestling, catch wrestling. And then, I was looking around for an instructor and I wanted something that was very self-defense focused. And that's one of the things that led me to Professor Pedro Sauer. And he had a very heavy focus on self-defense. At least that's what I was told. So that's I started traveling to Utah, training with him, me and a friend, and that been chasing him around the United States ever since.
Okay. Well, that's pretty awesome. Now talking about jujitsu, right? I think I've done jujitsu for a period of time in my life. I think it's a fantastic discipline. I think every man should train jujitsu at some point of their life. And what, in your opinion, maybe one or multiple most significant benefits of training jiu-jitsu itself now in comparison to other martial arts, for example? Because I know you have background in a variety of different martial arts, but I just want to ask you, in your opinion, what is it about jiu-jitsu that makes it such a functional and effective martial art?
The physical training that comes along with it. Once you get to the point, you get a basic education, you start to grapple and roll. You get in that environment, it's like lifting weights and doing cardio at the same time. You're pretty much bench pressing a grown man off of you and trying to
Hmm.
run from him at the same time.
Correct.
So, that combination builds strength, multi-dimensional strength, and it builds your cardio and stuff as well. And it's fun. It's sometimes you go to the gym and you get on the treadmill and you run for an hour. That's not always funny and fun to do. So sometimes lifting weights isn't always fun. But you'll get on the mat, you get a good partner, and you can roll for 2 hours and then stop and look up at the clock, and it'll feel like 30 minutes. And you can have a bad partner, and 30 minutes will feel like 2 hours as well. So
Yeah,
the trick's getting that good partner. So I would I would say definitely what the system does for health wise for your body, and it's like forced yoga. A lot of times you will take a loosening or stretching program to visit ranges of motion and positions that you don't normally visit on your job or in your everyday life. Well,
yeah.
jujitsu will make you do that.
Very true.
So,
Very true.
yeah, part of the deal is also going to be flexibility and the benefits that come along with that.
Yeah,
It teaches you your body. Um, you know, the human machine, once you learn intelligent mechanics and alignment, can do a tremendous things. And jujitsu will teach that. It'll teach you those things about your body, how to move, how proper alignment makes you stronger. So that education is I think a very powerful thing that comes along with the system, and it teaches you to get comfortable being uncomfortable. If I quote
definitely.
Pedro Sauer.
Definitely.
Yeah, and it's something he says is pretty often is you'll get in situations just like in life where you're uncomfortable. There's stress, there's something you have to deal with, and you learn how to deal with that. And the cool thing about it in jujitsu, and this is something I point out to my guys on a regular basis, life may throw that curveball at you every now and then. Jiu-jitsu throws it at you 3 times, 4 times a week. So you start to get good at it. You get used to it, because practice, right? The opportunity to place yourself in that situation, and you learn to deal with it. It's not a big deal anymore. And that rolls right over to life. When that real life curveball comes around, you handle it differently. Your mind thinks about it differently. Your perspective is not the same. So, I mean, I could go on, but to me, those are some of the major things that would stand out about the system and additional benefits that come from it.
I definitely agree with you. To me, I always looked at jujitsu as sort of chess under pressure, for like for physical chess, because not only are you forced, like you said, to bench press a grown man off of your body, you're also forced to strategize and calculate his moves combined with your own moves. So it teaches you to relax, and I had to learn that calming myself down actually benefits me versus using this necessarily using aggression and brute force. And which is what you said. If you have a horrible partner, I mean, you don't enjoy rolling with somebody who just wants to just use brute force on you. And it's pretty fascinating. But I have to ask you, right? I always ask everybody who's into martial arts, at a level that you are, top three most beneficial martial arts in that order when it comes to street fights?
Oh, we're going to stir up a hornet's nest here.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
I have a principle that I follow. It's called system as a source. And one of the things I think happens in the martial arts is sometimes if you allow it and you don't keep a 1,000-mile view, you will become systemized by a martial art. And what I mean by that is you will adopt the thought patterns, the belief systems from the system. And sometimes you won't even know that, and so you'll end up echoing these things without ever experiencing it yourself. So an example of that is you'll hear all fights go to the ground. And so that is a systemized statement. And for me, I think that's not necessarily a good thing. So I think it is good, especially when considering self-defense and combatives, to take a 1,000-mile view, to stand above the martial arts. And, you have to find answers that are specific to you. And so you have to have an educational process that does that for you. And we have to design that and we have to follow it. So if we can take ourselves out of that situation, we still have to find good information. And that comes back to the principle of system as a source. Martial arts has fantastic information. So I like to divide up combat in a blueprint that isn't necessarily from any martial art, and you look at the human being in a primal sense, and when they enter into a combat or a fight, they do certain things, whether they're trained or untrained. I want to know what those are and what are those areas of study, and I've got to find information for them. So an example of that is, since we're on the subject, grappling. If you go to the ground, you might need to know something. So we could look around and go, where can I find that information? And, first layer of the cake, we would say JiuJitsu, catch wrestling, CSW. But there are, in my opinion, there are different areas of study on the ground. I divide them up, and one of them is grappling. And when you start looking at the other options of things you can do that aren't necessarily in that element, it expands your capabilities. And you look at one of the things Bruce Lee did, he would take people out of their element. If he knew you were a boxer, he would say, I'm going to go get you and take you to the ground, or I'll do judo on you at that time. So he wanted to force you out of what you were commonly used to. So if we can figure out what are those areas and do at least some basic training and have a basic understanding in all of them, that puts us in a better position. So with that said, I wouldn't necessarily point at any particular martial art to gain that information, because martial arts aren't necessarily designed with our current environment in mind. And an example of that is they may not be visually correct. So if we were to go right now and kick it off in the parking lot, telephones are going to come out and people are going to go, this is going to be great on Instagram. I'm going to get so many likes and follows. So with that in mind, evidence is being collected, visual evidence. So I have to take that into consideration. I may not just be able to ball my fist up and throw it. Now, after a certain level, of violence, yes, maybe it doesn't matter. But fights don't always start full-on violence. They're usually a low level of social exchange. So you have to take that into consideration. Also have to take into consideration, is it going to be socially acceptable? Now, martial arts don't care if it's socially acceptable, but the current society does. And what is accepted socially 20 years ago, obviously, is not accepted now, right? That's come up a few times in the news. It also has to be legally explicable. As civilians, we have to take into consideration a force continuum. Mm-hmm. We have to be aware of certain levels of violence, and we have to have answers for them. And if I were to say one more thing, it has to be legally explicable, because I'm going to have to explain this to someone after it's over. And if I articulate what I did incorrectly, I'm in trouble. If I can do it correctly, I'm in less trouble. So you look at those things. Not many martial arts take that into consideration, but we have to. And that's what I mean about looking at it 1,000 mile view. When we up there and we're looking, I need answers for these things. How do I find those? And then I'll start to look. If I'm overly caught up in a system, I go in, I join the academy, my instructor says this is the best one for self-defense. Trust me. And I don't know any better. Well, I might do that for 5 years and I find out the hard way. Somebody mouths off to me at a bar. I step back in my stance and I make fist and I look at him with a stink eye. All of a sudden, the officer comes up to me and says, "Sir, come with me," because I am now the aggressor. So we have to take those things into consideration. And that's one of the things, leading back to system as a source, they don't necessarily answer that. So we need to. And we also have to take into consideration firearms, blades, because the bad guys are going to bring them.
Mm-hmm.
And, we need a good answer for them. So where do we find those things? How do we train those things? And then, where do we get wisdom through failure? And to loop back to rolling in jiu-jitsu, right? Lots of failure. We
Oh
come
yeah,
away from it going, I messed that up. Maybe
yeah.
I can fix that next time. So in all of those different environments, firearms, edge weaponry, blunt weapons, striking, pummeling, hand fighting, and ground, we have to have those environments where we can plug that in. We can get a partner and play against resistance and find out what we don't know. So we can answer those gaps in knowledge. With that in mind, I would say we would have to design our combative method or self-defense method based
Makes
on those
sense.
things. So I don't
Actually,
know.
I see your point, and I like
Yeah.
how you so eloquently and intelligently, you know, answered the question that I have. But I see the point you're coming from as a law enforcement officer myself. What you tap into, what you talked about, is what we call totality of circumstances. For example, if I were to engage right in a physical altercation and performance of my duties, there's a list of factors that I have to consider, right? My own training experience, my own physical abilities, my department, the law plus the department guidelines and procedures that I have to follow and policies, and then I also have to look at my partner, have to look at the
Mm,
circumstances where I am, what kind of ground I'm fighting on. Does my opponent have cauliflower ears? Is my opponent perspiring? Is all his clothes off and he's not feeling any pain because it's possibly under the influence? So all of that is a totality of circumstances, because at the end of the day, like it or not, and I hate to use that phrase, you have to be able to paint a picture. Like I had an instructor in the academy when it would come to physical combat, he would tell me he was Cuban, so he had this his sexy Cuban accent. I can't even make it. It's like, man, you guys got to make it look sexy. You got to make it look sexy. When you kick ass. I'm horrible at making the accent, but it stuck with me. I'm like, yeah, well, maybe not necessarily make it look sexy, but violence is not pretty. It is
mm-mm.
only pretty on TV when we watch John Wick and Born Ultimatum or 007, doesn't matter. But in reality, violence is ugly. And so this is when a training experience comes into play, that if, for example, if I'm wearing 25, 30 pounds of gear and now I have to fight somebody, I try to stay along the guidelines of make it swift, make it quick and effective. Because if you're now in a fight for over a minute, now I'm going into a disadvantage road because I have all that gear on me. Okay, I
Mm-hmm.
have all these weapons on me that if I lose the fight will, can be used against me or somebody else. And then, like you said, what comes out? Cameras and phones, right? And then there's
Yeah.
YouTube, there's World Star. So I like your answer. You answered very intelligently and not just like, Rampage Jackson. Oh, it's boxing, it's wrestling, it's jiu-jitsu, period. So thank you. Thanks for elaborating on that.
Yeah, I think those things are important because sometimes the combative community they don't roll, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
But there's different levels to an education in combat science, and one of them is attribute development, and that comes from doing it. From sparring, from rolling, knife fighting. You get timing. You develop the ability to have pattern recognition. You develop good optics. All of those things are important, and it comes from getting out there and doing it, which, there's parts of the community that will leave that part off. If I did this, it would kill you, therefore I can't train. But, both sides have really good information. It's just up to
Yeah.
us to wade through it
Me
and
too.
pick out what actually works for us at this time in history.
No, I agree. I agree with you. Now, there's a few questions that I have for you, right? One of them is this, and we talked about a little bit about ADHD before we started recording, right? So my question is this: where did this passion for martial arts come from? I mean, 43 years, dedicating 43 years of your life to something that you love, and not only just doing it, but achieving certain level, achieving a certain reputation, and throughout your career. Like, where did that come from? Could you elaborate a little bit about that?
Well, most of the time the story is I got bullied, but I was kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. I was a scrappy, rowdy youth. I liked physical exchanges, and it was fun to me. So I also, the school sent home a letter to mom and said, "Hey, you need to put this guy on drugs. We cannot handle him." And so mom was looking for an answer, and I was too. I used to fight sleep. I used to fight eating. I fought everything. So she didn't want to go the route of medication. So she looked around and found a local martial arts school, and
God
it
bless her.
was at that time it was Ishinru Karate. And I'm going to date myself here. They taught it at the local community college in a fallout shelter, and I went, I loved it. First night, I ended up fighting the instructor's two sons, and they beat me to death. And I was like, these are my people. I'm where I'm supposed to be. This is what I'm going to do the rest of my life. And I got the same feedback from him that I got from the teachers at the school. Man, you need to focus. You got no control of your mind. And that probably went on, even though I was loving the arts. I was looking for any way I could do to train anything. I loved it all. And I met a kung fu instructor around the age of 14. And he said that statement to him. I remember it clearly. I actually write about it in one of my books. And he said, "Man, you cannot focus. You need to fix that." And I remember just going, I know. And then he said something no one else said. He goes, "I'm going to teach you how." And he did, and it was amazing to me that he, regardless of the fighting, he gave me a how-to manual for my body, my mind. One of the first things he started me with was breath. And, he taught me the power of it. And it took a long time. I mean, it took me longer probably than it did everyone else because I had such a busy mind and it was very difficult to rein it in. But that is one of the things that stuck with me my whole life is those life tools and those skills that come from that culture and that environment, and teach you how to maintain and control your body. And if you can do that, you can go on to life to achieve great things. You can vibrate at a higher level, and that is one of the major pillars that has always kept me involved with it. That and just I still have that scrappy spirit. I love it.
I love that. I love that. We, you have a story to tell that happened in 1989, the life altering event that you went through, and I had no idea what hopefully you're about to talk to us about that happened to you, because looking at you, I mean, I hate to disclose your age. You're in your mid 50s, but you look fantastic. And then realizing that you went through that at an early age and still persevered and developed yourself into a person that you are today. So tell me what happened. Tell me what happened and how what changed besides just physical
Well,
part.
we're up to 14.
We're back there.
And at that time, you had to mow yards, rake leaves, wash cars to make money. And I was doing that at not only my neighborhood but the neighboring neighborhood. So I give that money to mom because I was a member at one point of every martial arts school in the small town I grew up in. and I was just eat up by it. And like I said, this is what I'm going to do. I was bought and sold, and up until about the age of 19, um, that was my chosen career. This is what I was going to do. And then in that year, I had a car accident, and there was a large lawsuit connected to it. Now, by now, they may not care, but I don't know. But I won't use their name. But one of the largest construction companies in the United States, their truck got into my lane and hit me head on. It was 4.5 ton construction truck, and it annihilated that car. It's when I remember coming out of it, one of the first things was the steering wheel was up close to me. It wasn't when I opened my eyes, it wasn't where it was supposed to be, And I remember going, "Oh wow," and some that hurts. The ribs hurt, and I realized that I had broken them. And I remember looking around, and the windshield was gone, and the hood was crumpled up against it. And I remember trying the door, couldn't get the door open, and the glass, was broken out of it, and everything was a mess. And we were out in the middle of nowhere, and I remember looking around and was like, "Well, hopefully somebody will come along and help us out." But it felt like an eternity. But I remember in my mind saying, "Well, I'm going to have to wait." And then I remember looking to my right and seeing my passenger, and she was not in good shape. And that stayed with me for years. So it's interesting, I've just recently, probably in the last 4 or 5 years, started telling this story. And one of the reasons I started talking about it was one of my good friends, Jason Redmond, talked me into it. I was starting to do more speaking, and he's like, "You need to tell that story." So I remember coming home and talking to Jennifer and going, "I'm going to tell you this story because I got to get to the point where I can talk about it and not get emotional." And that took a while, just to get to the point where I could talk about it without, getting too tore up by it. But she was in a bad shape. And I remember at that point, I've got to get out of this car. And I knew that it was going to damage me physically to get out of the vehicle, but I did it. And I remember going down, there was like a field, and there was a little house that had a light on. And I went up on the porch and knocked on the door. I remember the door opening and the lady taking 2 steps back and putting her hand on her mouth. And it was like looking at me. I was like, "Oh man, it must be bad." And at that time, I put my hand up on my face, and my fingers were just covered in blood. I looked down, shirt, and it was on her porch. And I remember going, "Oh, I'm so sorry about this. Can you call like an ambulance or somebody? We just had a wreck." Go back up to the car, hang out with the passenger until the ambulance showed up. And the second the guy touched my shoulder, he told me this later. I don't remember it. He came up and he put his hand on my shoulder because he thought I was a bystander until he saw my face, and I just passed out after that. So, that was pretty severe brain injury, facial injury. There's an implant. I don't know. Those don't look too good, but there's a piece of rubber that starts about halfway down and finishes it. It had crushed the bone so bad that they had to take it all out and put something in. And I remember after that being in the doctor's office and him saying, "Dude, it's over. You can't even play rough sports, much less do combat sports. And if you get hit in the head, it could make things worse, or it could just end it for you." And then everything going on with the lawsuit. The lawsuit in itself was a crazy story. But after that, everybody was like, "Nope, you're done." Parents, you're done. Girlfriend, you're done. All my buddies and the guys I train with, "Yeah, man, no, you got to be. It's unfortunate, but you're finished." I look like a raccoon. I think my eyes were swollen shut for a week. And I had one instructor actually. He was a Burmese Bondo instructor, which is similar to Thai boxing. And he's the only one that had a alternate opinion for me. And I remember one of the things he said, you can choose to do whatever you want to do, but take into consideration the tools you used on the mat or in the academy to achieve what you have achieved up to this point. I think at that time I was at an advanced rank in 3 or 4 different systems, just because I was insane. And he said, take those tools and then move forward in life, and don't stop. And then that was the moment where you, pardon my French, that was the fuck it moment. I said, look, I'm going to do it. Heart and soul was in the martial arts, and I don't know what I would do without it. I remember at that time going, it's like, what if I did get hit in the head and it was over? Well, you know what? It's a good run. And that might have been youth talking. We think we're indestructible. And I was around 20, 21 at that time. But that's what I decided to do. And everybody was against it. And I just started moving forward. And I had probably one of the best jobs in a small town at that time you could get. It was a warehouse job. And I was in compounding. I mixed chemicals for this company. And it might not be much now, but at that time it was like $22 an hour. And
So pretty good.
yeah, health, everything. And, I got an opportunity in the next town over. A gentleman, Paul Olivas, he was opening a kung fu school in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And he said, look, I need somebody. This is what I'll pay you, which was nothing. But you'll be a full-time martial artist. You can come, you can hang out at the academy all day. You can sleep in the back. I don't care. You can teach the classes. And everybody thought I was insane. And I did it next week. I said, quit the job, left town, and started pretty much living in a back of a martial arts studio, teaching classes. And just that was it. From that point forward, 100 miles an hour. And, eventually got to the point, like I said, I had a student that was a entrepreneur, and he started to teach those things that they don't teach you in school. And I started to apply them to the industry and get to the point where I was making some money. I was teaching privates, I was doing different things. I hate to think about the amount of money I wasted or blew, but I spent every bit of it traveling and training. And that led to starting to do research, which led to meeting Guru Dan, Francis Fong, Eric Paulson, because when you start looking around, who are these guys that are the best at what they do? And, if I could get in the room with them, then that was my goal. And I probably followed that path for about 5 or 6 years. And blew everything I made during that time.
Interesting. Wow, that's definitely an inspiring story. I can relate to the brief story you mentioned about what's her name? Your passenger's name? I think it was
Tracy.
Huh?
Mm.
Yeah, and I recently myself, after 20 years of carrying a burden, carrying my childhood trauma, I decided to open up about it and talk about it, and to first and foremost my family members, my family, and like my mother, and yeah, it is definitely liberating. So
It's something
props to
else.
you. It's what?
You're probably like me, police officer, tough guy, have a little bit of a reputation, got a little edge there. Nobody in your inner circle probably sees tears. Yeah. And on top of being in a positive, I'm generally a pretty positive person, so
Yeah.
everybody around me is like not used to this. So I'm like, Jay, he's like, I want you to tell this story. And we were actually leading up to a speaker summit, and he's like, I'm putting you on stage. You're going to speak.
Mhm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, oh man, I can't do that on the stage. So I got to practice with the people around me. I
Yeah.
practice with Iris. She has run my academy here in Woodstock probably for 23 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. Probably never seen a tear in my eye the entire time. So I start telling that story, and man, you just cannot stop it. And it amazed me. You know, all I did, I didn't tell anybody. I just shut it off, and that you can carry it for that many years, and it's amazing to me. And then, okay, well, all I'm going to do is talk about it. I'm a tough dude. I can, nope.
Oh no, sir, no, sir. I thought I could have it under complete control, and I had it under good control. There's a point in my life where I was in my early 20s, and I come, from a domestic abuse, physical abuse. My father was an alcoholic, physically abusive man, and I was never really taught about emotional maturity and controlling my emotions. So what's the best way to deal with your emotions as a man, right? Violence. Just
Yep.
just do violence. And then I realized, okay, cool. I only have two choices at this point. I either become a cop and I channel my violence to, bluntly put it, hurt bad guys, or I'm gonna end up like some of my family members, or even worse, either injured or in prison, or dead. So I channeled that, and I'm happy I did that. But in the process, I thought, I'm gonna make myself a badass. Like, I'm gonna be the best shooter. I'm gonna be the best fighter. I'm gonna be fit. I'm gonna have six pack. I'm gonna have all the girls. I'm gonna be this macho man that's completely undestructible. And I did. I did. I got the six pack. I was training martial arts. I became one of the best shooters in the department. Became an instructor. Had more goals than days in the week. But they didn't fix that. Internally, right here, I was that same little boy who just kept escaping. And so what I had to do in my 30s now, right, in the last couple of years of my life, is bust open that closet and start dealing with the skeletons one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. And I started off dealing with the skeletons that are at work, that I developed over my career as a law enforcement officer, so all the trauma and some of the PTS. But that was not the problem. The problem was like digging deep down into my childhood and dealing with that trauma. And so now I totally agree with you. Like, it's I cry. I cry. I cry with my mom. I cry with my wife. I cry now with, when I still talk about this, and it's fairly new. It's only been less than 6 months.
Hmm.
And yeah, it is tough. And I'm just trying to do the reps again and again and again, so that when I go on stage, hopefully one day I share, and, one day I will share stage with individuals like you and Jason Redman and Bedros. I don't want to cry on stage. So it's repetition. It's like martial arts, I gotta get the reps out, and I'm trying to get them out. So when the time comes, I'm not out there on stage crying. But yeah, all the toughness that I built, I mean, yeah, it served me well. It still serves me well, but it's nothing compared to that emotional and spiritual strength. Not at all. So thank you for sharing your story, with myself and our viewers. I can relate to that.
Awesome.
Yeah. Another question that I had for you is, now, this is just a professional question, right? I know you train a lot of agencies. Which agency was the most challenging one to train?
Oh wow.
Was it like
Well, those guys are going to
SWAT
call me if
teams,
they
or was
listen to
it,
this.
huh? What?
If I say this, those guys are going to call me if they listen to this.
That's a good one. No, it's because
I've,
I cross train with different agencies. I'm an instructor myself for firearms and tactics. So I know there's some challenges, but to me, there's just a professional curiosity. If you don't have to answer if you don't want to. It's just, I know how we are. I know how we can
Steve,
be.
if you're out there, I love you, but the air marshals. I love you.
I love you. Okay.
But a lot of times it is a prove it culture, and
Yes, it is.
so some will accept it. They'll go, that's cool, let's train. And some will be like, you got to prove it to me. And
Yeah.
that trip was a very prove it to me trip.
Yeah, definitely.
All of us were beat up at the end of the day.
I can tell you from personal experience. There's something about federal agencies that just it's I don't know if it's in their DNA or it's in the culture. And I have friends who are federal agencies. They just it's prove it to me culture. You know,
Yeah.
it's we know better. I was like, okay, okay. No, it's interesting. That was just to fill my curiosity. I appreciate you sharing that. All fun and games. Now, why do you think it's important for civilians to learn self defense?
Oh wow. Well, you're not necessarily in control of your exposure to violence. It's one thing that we got to remember is the bad guy doesn't think like we do. Sometimes we will reason in our heads, well, I wouldn't do this to another person because I think this and I was raised this way. I can't imagine that in his mind, my pair of shoes is worth my life. But that's not the case. There are predators out there who look at it that way, and they look at it like you would trade a dollar for a dollar, and they think that's okay, and just like we would exchange change. And so that's one is important to realize that that is out there. Now, we live in an incredible country, and we have professionals like yourself who bend over backwards to create an environment where we're safe, but that still exists. And there are chances that you will get exposed to it. In some places of the world we can avoid, but the bad guy, he generally knows where we are, and he's looking for an easy meal. And an easy meal might be the guy that has a soft underbelly and has never trained. And let me tell you something: those guys can look at you and know that. We don't have the ability to look at a person and know. They know how you hold your head, how you look,
Hmm.
the curvature of your spine, how you hold yourself, how you walk, the tempo of your movement. They're predators,
Hmm.
and and no one trained them. It's part of how they were created, in my opinion. And maybe you're an easy meal, and that raises the percentages. So what changes that? The couple of things. I could fake it. I could put some signs in front of the house and I wear the black T-shirt and try to look like I am not prey. Or I could place myself in a culture or a tutelage that will actually start to change how you hold yourself. We talked about this earlier in jujitsu. When you and this happens in all of the arts. As you have a combative exchange, as you slowly dip yourself in violence in a controlled method, you go to the academy, you've got a house full of like minded individuals and hopefully good people. But we all have a goal. We're here to do violence, and we're going to do it at a certain level so that we change ourselves, because when you get under that pressure, you change. And, if it is combat related, um, it'll affect the thickness of your skin. It'll affect how you walk down the street. And, it'll start to change your perspective, how you think. Well, the bad guy sees that. He can smell it. And that tells him that you're not an easy meal anymore. And there's lots of us. It's like a field full of sheep. Okay, if you're not my sheep, okay, cool. There's lots more. I'll just go down the street and get one of those guys. So that would be one reason to start finding some sort of education in the combat science. Another reason is if that happens, then you actually have a plan. You have something you can do to defend yourself at the very least. And now, that's you. But let's say you're out with your family, your wife, your kid, you're in an alleyway, and there's those three guys with ill intent. Things change at that point. It's like I may only have a certain level of will or determination if it's me. But, it's like a mother protecting her baby, right? As soon as I say those words, and that element's in there, then in my mind, I change. I'm like, okay, I am going to give this everything now. So at that moment, wouldn't it be cool to have some sharp tools that would increase your chances? Have some knowledge that would better the possibility of coming out on top. So that would be another reason to invest in it. And then there's multiple levels to it too. Self-defense is really one part, and I kind of divide it up. You have self-protection and you have self-defense. And what is self-protection? If you hired a bodyguard, the bodyguard industry is blowing up right now. And he comes to your house, he's going to do a threat assessment on you, on your home. He's going to look at your car and give you suggestions to make yourself safer. Maybe he looks at your route to work. How secure is the internet in your house? There's a list of things they will take a look at. But you can do that for yourself. That knowledge you can obtain. You can learn how to do a threat assessment on your own home. You could learn how to do one on your vehicle. Vehicles are becoming more and more susceptible to being shut down now due to a lot of the safety mechanisms that they're putting on them. They're pretty much rendering them useless. So having that knowledge is important. And that is before you ever ball up a fist. How to do advanced work. If you're going on vacation or, is there someone I can call at that location and talk to and get information about the security of the place I'm going to stay and all of that? And how can you do a on-site advance? And that's a terminology we use when you walk into a restaurant. And I know you do this because you're a professional protector. Where are the exits? Where are the weapons? Where are the good guys? Strategically, where do I need to place myself in this room? Where are the access points? Where are the things that would absorb rounds that I can hide behind? How quickly can I get to them? All of those things, and you may be hearing this and going, what? Well, that is valuable information that could save your life. Just where you're placed in a room. Imagine active shooter coming in, you may not have time to think. It might come down to just where you placed yourself in the room prior to that event. All of that information you can learn and you can start to train. And sometimes we'll say, well, that's paranoid. And it could be, and it may not be for everyone, but for the warriors out there, this is one of my missions in life, is, when things kick off, especially these days, I'm very old school. I have some old school codes that I follow, old school gentlemen, but phones will come out. They'll hold up the phone. This could be great on Instagram. Very few guys, and the ladies could too, step forward in those moments. And it feels like we have less of them. I want to create more of those guys that are trained and ready to jump forward and do something. And I want to be that myself. So with that in mind, you may out there be that guy. I want to be that guy. I want to protect my family. I want to be the element. I'm willing to do that. And that's powerful. And it's much like yourself. You made the decision to do the job you do. And thank you very much. That's awesome. You chose to be a warrior, and that makes you a safe environment. You're a mobile, safe environment. Wow. I could hang out with you and feel better about what's going on.
Thank you, sir. So, I appreciate that. I never heard that before. Mobile, safe environment. Okay.
That's right. Like that. I get accused of being a hostile environment, a mobile hostile environment, but you would be,
I can't imagine. I mean, the first time I met you, it was BK Live a few months ago, and they're in Scottsdale, and you sit down with Jason. You guys join our table, and you just sit down, and you just like so happy go around, like just humble guy, and you introduce yourself like, I'm just Jason's assistant, and Jason's like, yeah, I mean, it's Alan. Alan is a fighter. And I was like, nah, there's more to this guy. Like there's something in his eyes, first of all, that I know he's not just Jason's Jason Redman's assistant, and
Yeah.
obviously I come to find out, like, I wouldn't want to fight you in a dark alley. I tell you that much right now. Okay, and so
Well, I
just
think
it's
we'd
just
be working together.
yeah, hopefully, and I can't help but to remember, Jordan Peterson once said that the nice guy is not a good guy. A good guy is a man who's capable of significant violence, but he has it under complete control. So in my
Hmm.
mind, when I look at you, and maybe in my 20s I was that macho man, right? I mean, trying to be the best, most biggest badass out there. But now that I'm in my mid 30s, I'm like, nah, I don't. I want to be like Alan Baker. I just want to sit down and tell people like, hey, how you doing? Like, nice to meet you. I'm, so and so's assistant, but I know you can probably take me down in less than 60 seconds, and I'm willing to bet money on that because of your training experience. So that's my goal now. So what do you think? Is Jordan Peterson correct about that?
Yeah, he's absolutely correct, and we need those guys, in the world, that have the ability to touch and turn on that switch. Um, those are the guys that bring the others home.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's
and
true.
like I said, I don't know that there's that many of them. And I have a program called Warriors Path, and that's one of the goals of Warriors Path is to find them and just build that community of individuals that, in their mind they go, you know what, I want to be that guy. If something happens, I'm going to be the one to step forward. And it's not always a fight. It might be to help someone. You might put a tourniquet on somebody.
Hmm.
I mean, but you're the one that says, I'm going to be the individual that takes action, not pull out my phone. So we need those guys.
We definitely do, and I think it has fallen upon the current generation of men, you know, the wise elders like yourself, and I don't mean no disrespect to your age, and young bucks like myself, to raise the next generation of men, because I am in fear, in legitimate fear, that if I the reason why I do what I do, the reason why my podcast is called Purpose Over Pleasure, why I coach men, why I work with men, why I interview individuals like yourself, is because I realize that if we don't do this work right now and we don't help the next generation of men, by the time I have children and my children grow up, they're probably gonna have to go to war, because or
Yeah,
or or have to become fighters, and not in a pretty way. So I've never thought that I'll be sitting here, and when people ask me, well, what do you do? And I do a few things, and one of them is I teach men how to be men. Like, that sounds ridiculous.
awesome. I
Like,
like
I
it.
teach men how to be men, how to be masculine. That it boggles my mind when I say that. Like, who am I? I'm just me. But I am in a position now where I develop myself and I want to give back and teach men. But here we are. Like, we have to raise the next generation of men. And thank God, you know, November 6th today, certain somebody won the election, and there's hope, right? That good will persevere versus evil, and that we can save our children, our future of this country. But it's on our shoulders. The weight is on our shoulders now.
I agree. And totally agree. And behind that 100%. And that source of information may not be readily available to everyone. There might be somebody out there listening that goes, "Man, I wish I knew somebody like that." That someone that not only has a warrior spirit and they've said, "Look, I'm going to be a fighter." I've got that, whatever it is, that mean streak. And I mean, even the bad guy has a mean streak, but the good guy does too.
Yeah,
But the difference is, the good guy has a code that he follows, and he
yeah,
says, "This is my code." The bad guy doesn't. And, the bad guy knows when he's looking across the room at another predatorial mindset,
yeah.
and it's governed by a code. And most of them don't want anything to do with that.
No,
And that's a
there's
good thing.
yeah, there's no. I always tell people, when, especially nowadays, when people look at police, and after the whole George Floyd riots and all that, and defund the police stuff, I always tell people, listen, I'm not an angel you want. I'm not. I'm a monster you need. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to come out there and hurt people that don't deserve to be hurt, but I'm going to come out there and I'm going to do what needs to be done. And it's not going to be pretty. It is
Hmm.
never pretty. It is not. Hollywood choreographed movement. It's I'll get the job done. My brothers and sisters will get the job done. It's not going to be to your liking, like Father Sam Childers. I don't know if you know him. It's a pastor. Well, he used to be a gangster, drug addict, drug dealer, became a pastor, and now he started rescuing children in Africa. Incredible story. And he once said, like, listen, people judge me, people complain about me, people tell me about my past and what I've done, and saving these children in Africa. But we said, what if your child was kidnapped by a cannibalistic tyrant, and he wants to use your children to turn them into soldiers to go fight for him? Would you care how I bring back your child? Like, would you care what I have to do? You won't. You won't. So it's the code that guides us. At the end of the day, it's only a good guy who's capable of violence, or a good guy with a gun can stop a bad guy with a gun. And I
Mhm.
tell you this from personal experience, and I'm sure you already know. There's something about law enforcement work that you learn how to hunt those who hunt other people. Like, you learn the traits, the characteristics, you learn how to spot them, you know where to find them, you know how they act and what they do. And I've even had situations where I would be doing undercover work, or I'll be doing surveillance work, or just working an unmarked car, and we track somebody, and I saw with my own eyes that that person was tracking the victim, the next victim, the female, who was like this, like that. And I just saw the behavior, the patterns, the like you said, the talk, the action. It's like you learned all that, and the only thing that separates, that saves the majority of people out there is very little minority of people like you and I, who actually are willing to sacrifice our lives and stand and willing to die for what we believe in. At the end of the day, I think.
Agreed. And a lot of times violence lately is looked at as a bad thing. It's like, oh, violence. But it is a tool. It's not intertwined with your belief system, or your opinion. It is a tool. And like any tool, if you don't ever pick it up and use it, the day you do, you might not be that good at it. Um, so get good at it and have an understanding of it. This is something I've been talking about a lot lately in the martial arts. Is I call it the full spectrum of violence, and you want to understand it. Not all martial arts schools teach you that, or they'll cut off the top part of it due to the belief system of the martial art. Earlier I was like in the alleyway with the three guys and the wife and the kid, and ill intent. They're like, "Look, we're going to kill you. Take all your stuff." And at that point, if the pinnacle of what I'm trained to do is a choke with your T-shirt or an armbar, there's a problem. If my system hasn't introduced me to the higher ends of those things, then what am I going to do? I'm not prepared. And not all martial arts will give you that. Go back to that question of self defense. That is one of the tools, mental tools I use to measure. Am I learning the full spectrum of violence? Do I understand it and have enough training in it to do it? And then it's governed by your belief system. It's like you have a warrior's code. And for me, there's three I build for me and the guys I coach. The number one is the warrior's code. Two is the code of ethics. And number three is the gentleman's code. Old school, I know, but I believe in it. And so those govern how you exist. And, like you said, you may be a predator, but you have that code. And that makes you a good guy. And the bad guy will know it. And, when
Yeah,
it gets down to it, I'm going to be better at it than he is.
definitely, definitely, and that's what it comes down to. A lot of times is, what sometimes what sets men apart, and and again, it's not my quote, but I read that a long time ago, is not the capability of being violent, it's how far you're willing to take it. Because I have seen violence, I partake in violence, like, right, training and on duty. And like you said, there's a whole the spectrum of violence out there. So being able and being ready and understanding that sometimes might not be as bad as putting somebody in a chokehold, and sometimes it may be as bad as having to take somebody else's life by all means necessary. Like for me, one of the things that have been serving me well, and I learned that back in the academy, is replaying these scenarios in my head. Like I even talked to my wife. I'm like, listen, if we're at the mall and there's an active shooter, ideally I would want to get you out first. How and then I'm going back. So just know if I have the chance to do that if the car is nearby, or I'm securing you somewhere, I'm going back. I'm not staying there with you. But if it's happening in front of me and I have to put down the threat, I'm gonna do what I have to do, and it's not gonna be pretty. So just understand that what I need you to do, I need to go look for cover, concealment, dial 911, and do all the dispatch work behind me because I don't have time for that.
Right.
It's also training your mind mentally and understanding, just like in martial arts, right? Okay, if he does this, I'll do this. When you roll, if he does this, I'll do that. Same thing in the scenarios, like where am I at, this street, location, right? Like I said, totality of circumstances. So just kind of brainstorming mentally, and it's a proven fact that even if when you work out or do something, when you mentally replay, it kind of becomes muscle memory. But because brain is technically sort of a muscle too, it becomes sort of a muscle memory when you do that internally, internal work.
Yeah, and it's an interesting conversation. Um, the active shooter, and you're standing there with maybe a loved one or something, and they just see two targets. And I tell Jen this often is depending on the situation, I become a threat. Period. That puts their attention on me and not you. She doesn't like that answer, but it's like if I'm running at that person, they have to address it, and that
Hmm.
means they're not addressing the people that I love. So
Yeah.
here, yeah, get the hell out. Hopefully, I am accompanied by some tools. Hopefully, I can pick up that caveman's rock and bring it with me.
Yeah. I mean, by all means necessary, right?
Yeah.
Um, there's something I want to. I didn't get a chance to finish your book. By the way, great book. I highly suggest it for everybody who's watching us or who's listening. It's called Morning Mastery: A Warrior's Guide to Conquer Your Day Before It Begins. Great book, easy read. Okay, there's a few things that I wanted to ask you. First thing is, just out of curiosity, like the chapter on visualization, right? And you say
Mhm.
you can piece together visual imagery to design a visualization of an event or goal you want to achieve. And you go on to talk about the visualization and the work that it requires and the results. Are you talking about manifestation here?
You could look at it as manifestation. We were discussing earlier Chinese qigong, and one of the things they do is they want to change the program in your mind. Now they generally start with making space, so they have to clear things, and then once they have enough bandwidth, I want to put things in that are related to what do I want to do or what do I want to become. So, imagery is very, very powerful. You can put a movie on in your head, and your body doesn't know the difference if it's real or not.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can build them around your goals or the things you want to achieve. And I mean, this has been proven in sports,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a powerful way that you can start to reprogram your mind, which will directly relate to your perspective. And it's a challenging, and it's like rolling, lifting weights. It's not an easy habit to build, and for me, it's very challenging, just because of the ADHD and that I had to deal with. But I'll tell you this: it took time, but it eventually became habit. Now, so I'll teach these things, these mental tools now, our coach guys. I'll go, here's a mental tool for you. I want you to do this. Wow, that's difficult. Um, how do you think that? And I'm kind of at the point in my life, I go, how do you not? It's just automatic now. I don't even, I've done it so much in my life that that's just who I am. But that's the point, and that it will take a little time, but you will get there, and it'll have a huge influence on your achievements and what you do. And there are many ways to do it. One of them is yes, visual, and don't limit yourself. One of the biggest things I'll see is I'll go, well, I painted this picture, and 5 years later, I had it. It was happening. Man, I wish I would have shot higher. And I've done that myself. It's in the 90s. I'm like, well, if I could do this in 10 years, I'm just a martial artist. I'm a knucklehead. If I could do this, great. And then, 5 years later, I'm there, and I'm like, man, I should have shot for bigger. And I think I might have shot low the second time, and it took a couple of rotations before I said, all right, I'm going to aim for the sky. Same thing when you build that mental imagery. Don't be afraid to do that. I mean, it's just you. Nobody knows, but it will directly affect what you achieve. And that is related to, sometimes your mind will paint those pictures for you. The voice in your head, it'll say it for you, and then you'll have to correct it. That little guy sneaks up on you every now and then. When you least expect it, when you're playing on your phone and your mind slides into that state of no mind, or you're vegging out in front of the TV, that's when that guy sneaks up and taps you on the shoulder and tells you can't do something. Or that little side movie pops into your head of you not achieving those things. Sometimes you just brush those off, take the time to correct it, because you have the power to do it. You can change all of that.
Yeah.
And eventually, consistently over time, that'll just be who you are.
Yeah, your habits create your character, and your character, is who you are, and what creates your life. What is your I love how you talk about the use of cell phone when it comes to your morning routine. I mean, I am still guilty of it, and I can't help it. I grab my phone. Like today, I couldn't help it. First of all, I grabbed my phone. First thing I checked is, well, I already knew the election results, but I always check my email because I work with clients on the East Coast, and they wake up way before me, and so I do that. So I can't help it. But in general, a lot of times when I wake up, right, I have my morning routine. But you talk about the importance of putting the phone away. Now, me personally, I still struggle with that. Staying off my phone before I go to bed and not grabbing it right away. Upon waking up. Although I got better at not going to social media, strictly business,
Awesome.
right? Text messages, my employees, clients, and emails. So how can I, or how can my listeners or viewers make that habit even better? Like, how do I just? I'm being honest enough to admit that I'm having a hard time putting it away before I go to
Yeah.
bed, for example. Like,
Yeah.
how are you able to overcome that?
Like, you'll wake up, and you don't wake all the way up. You're a percentage awake, and you start to come into reality and realize that your hand's already.
Where is it?
What is this thing in my hand?
It's too late by then. Now,
What?
now your thumb is scrolling.
Yeah, it's too late. I can't put it down.
Help!
For me, man, that thing. Whew. One of the things I have the guys I coach do, we want to introduce morning routines and evening routines. So in the morning, one of the things I'll say is, I'm going to have 10 full cycle breaths before I do anything. And we'll multiply it. I'm going to have a full glass of filtered water, which I prepared for myself the night before.
I do that too.
Yeah. Have that ready, room temperature, wake up, and if it's in your hand, put it down, because it's just 10 breaths and a glass of water. That's it.
Can you elaborate on, explain the 10 full cycle breaths? Can you elaborate a little more about that?
So, when you, first of all, in the book, I think I've said the same thing in that book as well. The breath is the bridge. Proper breath work will give you tremendous control of your body. It will change your life. Yes. and it's one of the most powerful things I was given. And to this day, still, it is extremely powerful. And it hopefully that plants a seed, and you go, "Well, I'm going to find out about it."
Yeah. I
When
know
you go
Hoyt
to look,
Gracie is big on that. He wrote a book as well. That's why he was so successful at jujitsu. Just he
oh
that
yeah,
breath work he developed.
when you go to look for that information, there's going to be, the Iceman's breath. There's going to be this breath. There's the yoga breath, and they're all packaged breathing. But what you want to do is approach it with an intelligent educational process. And what do I mean by that? It's like learning to write. They start you out with the alphabet, the series of letters, and they make you sing this song, and it doesn't spell anything. But eventually, you develop the skill to create. So we want to do that with breath. What is the alphabet of breath? Now, for me, I refer to it as the full cycle breath. So it is a specific breathing pattern that I teach that teaches the major fundamental elements of breathing entirely. And so if we can get good at those, like learning the alphabet, eventually you'll make your own word, your own sentence, and you'll make your own paragraph. And you can build breath around what you need in life. If I need to concentrate more, or if I'm chasing the bad guy and I need to do a recovery breath really quick and regain control of my body, Hickson Gracie. And then I just spell the word and I go to work. And that's the problem with the package breathing out there is they don't teach that, but that's what you're looking for. And that's what what I mean by the full cycle breath. And it teaches full range, and it also introduces you to the full capability of your instrument. In other words, you'll learn to use all the keys on the keyboard, not just a few, because your body is capable of incredible things. So that's the full cycle breath. So once you train breath and you get good at it, you'll get to the point at least that a breath will take you 1 minute. So let's say you did 10 minutes, you will take 10 breaths. Most people go, and I'm done, right? But as you master it and you gain control of your body, and part of that control is you'll gain capacity. Most people only use about 30 or 40% of the capacity of their pulmonary system.
Correct.
Yeah. So you'll learn, wow, you have a huge capacity. And then if you train it, it's like going to the gym, your body will change. The elements that control breath will get stronger, looser, and you'll gain greater control of it, which will allow you to breathe more intelligently. So let's say you go through that process and now 10 minutes, 10 breaths. And it will, like I said, it'll change your life. It'll oxygenate your body. It will detoxify your body. Yeah, definitely. I
Hmm.
have guys that will start breath training, and it might take about 30 or 40 days, and they'll go through what's called a cleansing crisis, and that feels like a cold. But what's happening is your body is getting to the point where it will cleanse itself. And one is because of the increased oxygen in the bloodstream. But additionally, if you're doing intelligent breath, you're basically massaging the organs in your torso,
Hmm.
because as you learn to operate the diaphragms in the torso, you're moving and kneading and moving those organs around. Well, having that happen, it's just like if you had someone massage your bicep. If there's toxins trapped there, after about a week or two of that, they're going to come out. So the body has to dispose of those. So just one of the many things that'll come out of it. So if you get up in the morning and you wake up and your hands on that phone, you got to let it go and just take 10. And if you don't know the full cycle breath, 10 full belly breaths, you could say that as deep as you can. And then when you exhale, get it all out like a cough. You just empty yourself. And then you drink that glass of water. And then, okay, you can pick up your phone. As a start, and let's say you did this for 2 or 3 months and you build this habit and you start waking up, you'll be hungry for that breath and for that water. Your body will crave it.
Yeah.
And
I
then,
yeah. I noticed that with water. I noticed of a water that I do have to have my glass of water in the mornings. And then, what is your morning routine? What is your night routine nowadays?
Oh, well, the morning routine, the book actually that you're going through, um, that reason that came about is that question. You have a lot of people who just loosely build a morning routine. Well, read a book, uh, have some tea, sit quietly. You could say meditate. But for me, like Chinese martial arts, Qigong has some of the most intelligent morning routine information. We could say that available. And so in the book, we talk about there's certain elements that we want to achieve. And one of them is breath. And we just talked about that. Another one is tension control or flexion control in your body. And if you imagine a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being like a dead body, completely relaxed, and 10 being a fully activated body, electrically activated body. In other words, you've gained the ability to flex at a high level. Most people exist between a 4 and a 6. They can't relax past the 4, and they can't activate past a 6. Now, if you go to the gym and lift some weights, you're going to rewire your muscle system, and you'll be able to flex at a higher level. But you look at some of the drills that Shaolin monks do, stone warrior training, and they're not necessarily using tools. They don't lift weights right away, but they are doing exercises at high levels of flexion. Well, they're rewiring their ability to activate a higher level of those muscle fibers. So the average guy activates, let's say, 30 or 40. That monk might activate 60 or 70. Now, they don't necessarily get bigger. They just gain the ability to flex at a higher level. Now, you could get bigger too. To me, there's two ways to do it. You can go to the gym and put on size, but you could also increase the amount of control you have over that muscle group. Now, on the opposite end of the scale, the ability to relax, because I mean, I hear stress kills you. So it's the ability to recognize that in the body and then release it and let it go. That is a skill you have to learn. And if you do the drills enough, you mentally you'll get to the point where you can just turn the body off, and that's a high level skill. And it directly affects your health, and on the combative side, it directly affects your athletic ability. If I want to, for example, I want to throw a punch, and I already hold a level of tension in my body for whatever reason. Well, then I only have what is available above that to activate explosively to hit someone. If I can increase that range, in other words, if I say I relaxed a little more and now I gained another 20% that I can explosively activate, I'm going to have more power in my punch. Some people have this naturally. They're called talented athletes. God gave them the ability to do it. The rest of us have to train, or we have to do our morning routine. So that is an example of flexion. So when you design that morning routine, you want to have the element of breath, but we also want to have an exercise that will introduce flexion control. And this might only be like 5 minutes because we know we're going to do it consistently over time. And 4 or 5 years from now, we'll have better control of that. So another section might be your mental capacity. In other words, control of your mind. Am I able to silence the mind, which is very challenging these days? It's like that phone puts the input into your mind that I might not want in there, the TV, sometimes the radio, gossip. And
Yeah.
so, right, it's just full of processing stuff all the time.
Hmm.
And it's very difficult to find peace in today's culture. It's like you may have to go out camping and spend 3 or 4 days in the woods before you finally get to the point where you hit that moment where okay, I let go. But we should have the ability to increase that and gain greater cognitive control of our minds. Well, there are drills to do that. And that should be part of your morning routine. as well. You see how powerful it would be if you were
Hmm.
to just spend a minute or two in the mornings doing it. And then strength, which would be the upper end of the scale we talked about. How can I train that? Because strength is very important. You know, look at the elderly once they get to a certain point. You know, hard to reach over their head or get up out of bed. And that's when you start to realize how important it is to cultivate that and develop it. Well, you don't have to have weights or tools to do that. They're
Hmm.
great if you do. I'm a big believer. But you look at Gung Fu and Stone Warrior and how you could stand in one spot and do an exercise for 5 minutes,
Hmm.
and it will, at the least, maintain your level of strength, if not increase it over time. And of course, you could go to the gym and do things as well. But we're talking about, let's imagine this crazy martial artist um, who travels and goes everywhere and doesn't have access to a gym. He might need to know that information. And because it's consistently, and that is your morning routine. It's something you're going to do consistently every day uh, through time. And we want to build it intelligently so that it has effect on these major areas of the human machine. I can talk
Yeah.
about this for a while. Wrote a book on
Yeah. No, it's
it.
true, and the more research is coming out that showing that functional strength, muscle mass, and bone density are key to longevity.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so, and definitely, like to me, I've always been a fan of calisthenics and calisthenic work, because it builds functional strength, and it makes you learn how to utilize your body without necessarily having to isolate muscle groups.
Right.
Because I can have a crazy workout in 20 minutes. All I need is a floor, maybe a pull-up bar,
Yep.
and I will have a complete full body workout. So it's definitely possible. I 100% agree with you on that one.
Well, and I'll give you something.
Huh?
Uh, have you ever done any work with Indian clubs?
Indian clubs,
Yeah.
like American Indian.
No. So what you'll do is just do some research on Indian clubs, and when you enter it in Indian clubs and physical culture, change your life.
And physical. Okay.
Yeah, and this is something I've done my whole life, and recently in the last year or two, I've had some major surgeries on my shoulder, elbow. So I'm having to go back through the recovery process. And so I'm starting to, my doctors are releasing me and they're going, okay, you can now start training. And I started picking up the Indian pins and the Indian clubs, and they are amazing for your joints.
Oh,
And it's
Indian clubs. Okay. Okay. Yes,
right,
I've tried it one time.
specifically the
Yeah.
shoulders and the elbows,
Oh
which,
yeah, I remember that shoulder
yes,
burn.
um, it's something to learn now. You will definitely use it as you move along your journey, especially injuries. If you're training and you're getting in there with those knuckleheads in jujitsu and Thai boxing, uh, that range of motion gets limited quicker than most.
Yeah, definitely does. Definitely does. I'll look into that. I appreciate that. Um, I want to go back to your story of healing. I want to go back to that incident that that you now also started heal yourself 4 or 5 years ago and started to talk about more. And I want to give you the opportunity to have one more rep, right? But besides that, I just want to kind of hear that story and how you healed and overcame it, and what kind of person you came out after that, because I know for a fact I will be inspired by it, and I'm sure there's somebody else out there who'll be listening to us talk and to listen to your story, and maybe it will help them heal as well.
As far as recently reintroducing it
Yes, yes,
into
that's
life,
yeah, the story that Jason
well,
Redman told you need to talk about, Alan.
you know, um, we were working on speaking. He is a speaking coach for me, as well as a friend, and he'll listen to me do a presentation, give me some homework. 6 months, 8 months later, he might be able to hear me do something again, and Jason has a speaker summit once a year, and I always go, and it gives me an opportunity to get in front of my friend and take some abuse
Yeah, I
for
want to
my
go to the next
presentation.
one as well. Yeah,
Oh, it's
I
great.
told.
It's great.
Yeah,
And he's like, I'm a lot of times I talk about the Warriors Path program, and I'm building this program or this presentation now based around sword play and leadership. And he goes, "Well, tell me about your life. What events? What events?" And well, this happened once. I punched this guy one time. I got choked out this one time. That's not good enough. That's it. That's all you got. And I remember I was in person with him, and I go, and you gotta think that I have an inner circle of friends, the staff that runs my academy. I've been around 25 years, close friends. I have never talked about this ever. I've got family members that if they weren't there, nobody knows about it. I just completely buried it. And I'm sitting there thinking before I open my mouth, am I about to tell this dude? I mean, this guy's an American hero. Tough, talk about a tough dude. And
yeah.
here I am going to talk about, a car wreck. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. So I start talking about it, and he starts picking it apart, and it's obvious that it's emotional. And he goes, "That's what I'm looking for." And I'm like, "Oh, I knew he was going to say it too." He goes, "I want you to tell that story." And there's just from what he gathered in that short amount of time, he's like, "There's so many lessons there, and it's going to be super powerful." So I'm like, okay. And we get comfortable in life. You build your world, and this is who you are. And we don't get outside of the lane too often, or as they say, get outside of the box. I was outside of the box, outside of the room, outside of the house. And so I remember I drove up to Virginia Beach for this event, and I was going to drive back. It's a 10-hour drive. I can't tell you how many times I changed. I'm not going to do that. Hour later, okay, I'll do it. An hour later, I'm not going to do that. Yeah, I probably did that the whole drive back. And, at the end, it's like, it's not so much the story that got me to the point where I'm like, I'm doing it. It's the fact that I'm sitting there not wanting to do it. And I'm like, we're talking about, dude, you're a warrior. And here you are. You're afraid. You're afraid to step into the unknown over this topic. And get in public speaking in itself, as it's already challenged a bit. And at that point, it had nothing to do with the story, nothing to do with Redmond. It's the fact that I didn't want to do it. I mean, in my soul, I didn't want to do it. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do it. And when you're putting together a keynote or a presentation, you set up a timer and you have an outline, and you go through that a lot. I went through probably 20 times on my own, nobody else in the room. And it's like waterworks. And like I said, the last 20 years, I had no reason to do that ever. So I might have stubbed a toe on a coffee table and maybe got a little bit of tear or two, but it was amazing me. Even I had buried it, and, forgot how much power it held because the young lady was adversely affected. It changed her personality afterwards. She was a different person. And, I was out of work recovering, and I was one of the people that babysat this person as they colored coloring books because of where they were mentally. Just this is not even part of the talk, but all of that, is connected to that event. So I got to the point where, it's getting a little better. I'm making it through the presentation, and I said, well, I'm going to put the presentation on for Jen. And she's sitting there wide-eyed. What is going on? Because she's never seen it. What the heck? This is not what Alan does. So I had to do that a few times. And I got to the point where we're just talking about it. And, it's like wringing the water out of a rag. You can wring that thing quite a bit before it starts to get dry. But I eventually got to the point where I'm making it through it, and the emotional energy is there, but I'm able to make it through it. And went back to the summit and was able to discuss it and plug it into the presentation and make it. But it was powerful. I mean, it affected. We had people there, and it affected people in the front row. They came up afterwards, which was amazing to me. They were like, "Oh man, this and that," and made me think about this and make me want to change some stuff. So, which is the purpose of it, is to have influence in a positive way and help people. So I was able to make it through it. I might not have told the whole story, but the reason is because I prepared for like maybe 30 to 45 minutes of talking. But when we showed up for this event in classic Jay, it was like, all right, everybody, you only get 15 minutes. So, and you're doing it tomorrow. And I'm like, what? So I did have to shorten it a little bit, but it turned out well. I was complimented on being one of the better presentations. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That is definitely powerful and inspirational, and gave me a lot to think about for myself. So thank you for sharing that. Did you did you heal from did you make peace with the regret?
Uh, I probably maybe a little bit. I mean, I'm still friends with the individual, and but man, that was a powerful moment in life. And when you're going through a moment like that, you switch gears and you get it done. As there's a certain mindset. There's a gear you go into to take action, and but you still record that moment. And there was a lot of power to it. I mean, the wreck, and then the lawsuit that came afterwards. Really, one of the most powerful parts was the moment when I looked over and the condition she was in. A lot of times I'll describe it in the keynote, and that's still it's still tough.
Yeah.
Mm.
But I think that's B told me one time. B just told me, like, when I sort of shared my little bit of my story with him, is like, listen, man, that's your gift. Weaponize it. Weaponize it. More people will relate to you when they start seeing the chinks in your armor, which is the
Mm.
complete opposite of what I've been doing my entire life. I was like, I'm gonna build this warrior, and nothing will phase me, and no one will see me cry, and I'll be the protector, right? He's like, no, 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 no. It's the chinks in the armor that you need to expose. It's the hurt and the pain that you talk about. It's the sharing that, overcoming regret, and the healing journey. So it's like, man, I gotta unlearn everything I knew now, and I gotta go into that mode.
Yeah. Or it to me it kind of becomes the warrior. And I mean, you have a switch, and you can click that on, and all of that stuff comes up. The machine starts to operate, and then we're back off. I get to be me. But that's one of the things that makes you that warrior is you have built that machine over there that you kept tucked into the room, and it's ready at a moment's notice. The moment's notice, you just got to hit that switch, and everything changes.
It sure
So
does.
yeah,
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
yes,
Appreciate
sir.
that. And now I want to wrap this up. This amazing, amazing interview. Thank you for being so honest with me. But I always like to ask my guest a question, and the question is this: what do you think the purpose of life is, and what is your purpose in this life, essentially? So it's kind of a two-part question.
Oh wow. Well, there's obviously an answer to that that's related to the creator. But I could say, while I'm here. on this rock, hurling through space, and with the
Right.
gifts that God gave me. Um, I build a community of warriors, and I help refine them and prepare them for something that may never happen. But that's what being a warrior is. We actually want to avoid it because if once you've tasted it, it's not something you want to go to, but you still prepare. And I think there's less of us out there, and that's a shame. So that's one of the things I want to do is make more and guide the new ones. If you're out there and you have that spirit in you, and if you do, I don't even have to explain it. And you have that desire to make a difference. And part of that desire is the will to prepare. And people get ready for different reasons. I just want to know information for self defense, but it's different for a fighter. It's different for a warrior, especially one that wants to make a difference. And you don't have to describe that. Like you're giving me the nod. So if you're that guy or gal, and you're like, man, are there other people out there like that? Yes, there is. And there's guys out there who have lived a lifetime, and those guys are walking libraries of information and knowledge. Go find them. It's the old school mentor principle. You know, uh, find them, and most of them, if they are worth their spit, they will be a mentor, and especially if they see that hunger, the desire to find that knowledge, to grow, to change, put in the effort, because there's not much of that in the world these days. So a good mentor, if they see that, sometimes they'll be like, okay, here's free information, free knowledge. Join me, and become part of the culture in that group, that small army of change agents.
I love it. You're absolutely right. That the change starts first and foremost within, and then you become a magnet. You become a magnet of change, and having a mentor is absolutely crucial and important in life because a mentor is like a stairway to success. They'll tell
Oh
you
yeah.
what to do and they'll tell you what mistakes to avoid. But you have to be ready. My mentors appeared in life when I was ready for that next step. And
Hmm.
that's when I, on my journey, and I come across different people. I mean, you are in the last hour and a half, you've been my mentor, and hopefully we can carry on this relationship and I can learn from you. But this is what it takes. You have to have the open mind, and the teacher will appear when a student is ready.
Agreed.
Yeah, I believe with that.
Sometimes he's there before you realize it. You just recognize it after a certain point. You got to get kicked in the
Ooh.
teeth a few times, and then you're
Yeah.
like, "Wow, that guy knew
Ooh.
something after all."
That was good. That was really good. Sometimes he's there already, you just don't realize it.
Yeah, you're
Amen to
blind
that.
to it.
Yeah, amen to that. Well, Alan, this was an incredible interview. Thank you so much. Thank you for being honest, for being vulnerable, for sharing your knowledge. I mean, over 4 decades of experience, like you know what you're talking about. And just meeting you in person, I was fascinated by how humble you are, and then learning how skillful you are, and then talking to Jason. Just thank you for joining me, and
Thank you.
yeah,
Thanks for having me, man. It's
no,
an honor, pleasure.
thank you. I appreciate that, and I want my viewers and listeners, and I'll put in your information in the episode when it goes up, and et cetera, et cetera. But I want you to let them know how to find you. How can they find you? How can they connect with you? Just let them
Probably the
know.
main source would be the website. It's sifualanbaker.com, SIFUALANBAKER.
Got it. channel. Well, let's funnel them all to your website.
Yeah,
Yeah.
come see me.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I'm gonna wrap this one up. If you guys enjoyed this episode, stay tuned. Click like, subscribe, and share it with your with those who you think may benefit from this. And make sure to follow this gentleman, this savage. He definitely knows what he's talking about, and he's don't let his kindness and humbleness confuse you, because he is a true warrior and a testament to his work. So make sure to follow Alan Baker.
Thank you.